Now that you've had your cheap thrills, I suppose you'll dump me for somebody else, right?
For 30 years, Johnny Carson wasn't just a late-night host. He was the gatekeeper of American celebrity culture. A single guest spot on The Tonight Show could make you famous overnight. But if you crossed him, on air or off, it could also be your last.
He's aloof. Actually, that was more shy. See, when I'm in front of an audience, it's a different thing.
Why?
I'm in control.
Despite the show's laughter, charm, and cool exterior, Johnny Carson was known to hold grudges, deep ones. He didn't shout, he didn't scold, but when he felt disrespected, he simply erased you. No second chances, no public explanation, just silence. What could push the king of late night to shut the door forever? Was it betrayal, ego, a clash of comedy styles, or something more personal? Let's step into the shadows behind the curtain. Here are 6 guests Johnny Carson hated so much. They were banned for life. If you enjoy untold Hollywood stories like this, make sure to subscribe and let us know in the comments which late-night guest moment you'll never forget. Number 1, Joan Rivers. She wasn't just a guest, she was family. For decades, Joan Rivers was one of Johnny Carson's most frequent and beloved visitors on The Tonight Show. Her quick wit, biting humor, and undeniable charm made her a regular fixture in Carson's late-night universe. But when she landed her own late-night show in 1986, without personally informing Johnny, the friendship shattered overnight. Carson viewed it as betrayal. He never spoke to her again. What began as a professional rift turned into a lifetime ban, and a painful silence that haunted Rivers until her death. At the height of their on-screen chemistry, Joan wasn't just another funny guest. She was often the substitute host. Carson had even once said she was the only one who could handle the desk while he was away. "She's the best substitute host I've ever had," Carson once told a producer. But behind the scenes, tension had begun to simmer. As Joan grew into a household name, NBC executives saw her as a natural late-night successor. And when Fox offered her her own talk show, complete with creative control, she took the deal. The moment that changed everything wasn't the contract. It was the phone that never rang. Rivers didn't call Carson to break the news herself. According to Joan, she feared he'd talk her out of it. According to Carson, he was blindsided. From that day forward, Carson cut her out completely. "He never returned my calls. He never forgave me," Joan later recalled. She was banned from The Tonight Show. When Carson retired in 1992, she wasn't invited to the farewell. The man who once called her brilliant never mentioned her again. Their silence lasted over 25 years, and even after Carson's death, Joan remained blocked from The Tonight Show until Jimmy Fallon personally brought her back for a brief return in 2014. By then, the wound had calcified into legend. Carson never explained himself publicly. He didn't need to. In his world, betrayal wasn't dramatic, it was final. Number 2, Bob Hope. Bob Hope was comedy royalty, but as the years went on, Carson grew increasingly irritated with Hope's appearances. According to staff members, Hope treated The Tonight Show like a promotional platform, bringing cue cards and refusing to engage in organic conversation. Carson felt the spontaneity, the heartbeat of live television, was being strangled. "There was no room to play," one writer recalled. Eventually, Johnny stopped inviting Hope altogether. It was an unspoken ban, but it rang loud in late-night circles. In the early days, their relationship was warm and full of mutual respect. Carson often credited Hope for paving the road that all late-night comics now walked. Hope, after all, had pioneered the blend of topical humor and Hollywood presence. "Without Bob, there would be no us," Carson once said during a retrospective. But over time, something changed. Hope's material became rigid, his visits increasingly orchestrated. Writers remember him arriving with long lists of jokes and plugs for upcoming specials. Carson, who prized improvisation, began to feel boxed in. Interviews became performances. Banter turned into broadcasts. Writers from the show later revealed that Johnny dreaded Hope's visits. "It wasn't that he disliked the man, it's that there was no conversation left," said one longtime staffer. And Carson wasn't alone in feeling this. NBC executives noticed the drop in energy during Hope's segments. Younger guests brought edge and unpredictability. Hope, brought scripts. And that, in Carson's world, was the beginning of the end. Johnny hated being scripted, especially by someone else, said a Tonight Show producer. After a particularly wooden appearance in the late 1980s, Carson never invited Hope back. There was no confrontation, no statement, just silence. Hope's name was quietly removed from booking sheets. Carson didn't hate Bob Hope, but he hated what the appearances had become: lifeless, mechanical, promotional theater. In a show built on timing and spark, there was simply no room for routine. Number 3, Shelley Winters. Shelley Winters never held back. She was brash, unpredictable, and famously unfiltered. But it wasn't her words that got her banned. It was a moment. On one of her final appearances, Winters stormed off the stage mid-interview after clashing with Carson. She later accused him of mocking her weight and dismissing her serious film work. Carson, in turn, declared she'd never be back, and she wasn't. The incident was buried by network PR, but crew members remembered the tension vividly. Winters was known for turning interviews into monologues. She dominated conversations with stories, some funny, some erratic, all unforgettable. Carson, who preferred a careful rhythm to his interviews, often found himself steamrolled, but what started as minor irritation soon turned into something deeper. During one appearance in the early 1980s, Carson reportedly made a passing joke about her being larger than life, a comment that on air drew laughs but backstage caused a blow-up. "He laughed at me, not with me," Winters told a magazine later. What followed was chaos. According to multiple staffers, Winters stood up mid-interview, called Carson a fraud to his face, and walked off without saying goodbye to the audience. The broadcast aired a cleaned-up edit. But word of the clash spread quickly. Carson reportedly told producers that night, "She's never coming back." It wasn't just the outburst, it was the accumulation of tension. Winters had long challenged Carson's control of the room, his ability to steer the conversation. "I wasn't there to play nice, I was there to be real," Winters once said on another show. After her final appearance, her name was quietly added to an internal list of non-returning guests. It wasn't a network blacklist, it was personal. Carson had no interest in sparring matches disguised as interviews. For Shelley Winters, authenticity was everything. But for Johnny Carson, control was sacred. And when those two forces collided, only one made it to the next show. Number 4, Wayne Newton. It started with a joke, but ended in a hallway confrontation. Carson made repeated jabs at Wayne Newton's appearance and masculinity during monologues in the early 1980s. But Newton wasn't laughing. According to multiple accounts, the singer stormed into Carson's office unannounced and confronted him face to face. What happened behind that door remains disputed, but afterward, Newton was quietly blacklisted from the show. Carson never addressed it on air, but the absence spoke volumes. At the time, Newton was a Vegas icon, flashy, sentimental, and deeply tied to a more traditional brand of showbiz. But to Carson, he became an easy punchline. The jokes weren't just about his voice. They often hinted at his looks, his rumored plastic surgery, and his flamboyant style. "He looked like a walking Ken doll," Carson quipped in one monologue. While audiences laughed, Newton was quietly seething. The final straw came after a week of particularly pointed jabs. Newton, who happened to be in Los Angeles for a television appearance, decided to confront Carson directly. According to backstage accounts, he entered NBC unannounced and made his way to Johnny's office without security. What was said behind closed doors has never been confirmed. Some say Newton threatened legal action. Others claim it got physical. Newton himself later said, "I told him to say it to my face, and he didn't. I was raised to stand up to bullies," Newton said in a later interview. Whatever occurred, the result was immediate. Carson stopped mentioning him in monologues, and Newton was never invited back, either as a guest or as a punchline. It was as if he had been erased. In Carson's world, confrontation was rare and never rewarded. Newton brought heat backstage. Carson responded with cold silence, and in the quiet that followed, Newton's name was never spoken again. Number 5, Charles Grodin. Charles Grodin took deadpan to dangerous levels. His intentionally awkward appearances blurred the line between bit and brawl, creating tension that some audiences found hilarious and others found unbearable. But Carson reportedly hated it. Behind the curtain, he felt Grodin's confrontational style sabotaged the show's rhythm and derailed the interviews. After a few particularly uncomfortable segments, Grodin was never asked back. Even decades later, viewers still debate, was it brilliant anti-comedy or the ultimate late-night faux pas? Grodin wasn't new to tension. His brand of humor was built on discomfort, pauses that lingered too long, retorts that sounded too real, and a refusal to break character even when things got awkward. For some hosts, like David Letterman, this created gold. For Carson, it created chaos. "I don't know if he was joking or just hostile," a Carson staffer later remarked. In one infamous appearance, Grodin challenged Carson's questions, turned inquiries back on the host, and appeared visibly irritated. The studio audience was divided. Some laughed nervously, others sat in silence. Johnny, used to control and clean beats, was thrown off. Writers recalled Johnny wrapping the interview as quickly as possible that night. "He hated when a guest pulled focus without payoff," one producer said. "With Grodin, it felt like a game only he understood." Grodin's approach was always tongue-in-cheek, but he never let the audience in on the joke. That ambiguity, while fascinating to some, was infuriating to Carson. "Johnny wanted the viewers laughing, not guessing," said a longtime cue card operator. After his final appearance, Grodin was unofficially blacklisted. He continued to perform and act elsewhere, his talent never in question, but the Carson stage was closed to him for good. In a world built on timing, Grodin played with silence. But Carson didn't see irony, he saw interruption. And in late night, that was the one rule you never broke. Number 6, Paul Williams. Soft-spoken, introspective, and an unlikely face in a world of punchlines. Paul Williams was a unique figure on The Tonight Show. But off-camera, tension brewed. Williams later suggested that Carson was cold and dismissive toward him, perhaps seeing him as too sensitive for the format. A rumored backstage exchange, never confirmed, led to Williams being quietly dropped from the guest list. Whether it was a personality clash or something deeper, one thing was clear: Johnny Carson never invited him back. Williams was unlike most guests who walked through those studio doors. He didn't explode with charisma, he disarmed with gentleness. A successful songwriter, actor, and composer, Williams penned hits like Rainbow Connection and We've Only Just Begun. But on The Tonight Show, his style clashed with Carson's rhythm. While Johnny thrived on sharp timing and fast-paced wit, Paul often leaned into emotional openness. "I wasn't there to tell jokes, I was there to be me," Williams once said. In one particular appearance, Williams offered a vulnerable story about addiction and recovery, long before such conversations were common on television. Carson, visibly uncomfortable, pivoted quickly back to a light joke. According to Williams, the energy backstage was cold. He later hinted in interviews that Carson didn't understand his sincerity and may have viewed it as weakness. "There wasn't room for softness on that stage," Williams told a documentary crew. The alleged confrontation that followed wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was final. After that episode, Williams was never asked back. For Paul Williams, the rejection was never about fame, it was about human connection. And for Johnny Carson, whose legacy was built on precision and control, Williams represented a different kind of guest. Too raw, too reflective, and ultimately, too real. They came for laughter, for fame, for a seat beside the king of late night. But in Johnny Carson's world, one misstep could turn a door into a wall. These weren't public feuds, they were private fractures, moments of tension sealed in silence. Carson never raised his voice, he simply vanished you. Behind the curtain, legacy was shaped not just by who appeared, but by who didn't. For every dazzling guest who became a star, there were those who left without a goodbye, frozen out by a host who never forgot a slight. It wasn't about hate, it was about rhythm, trust, and a control few ever fully understood. These bands weren't loud, they were quiet echoes, still felt decades later. Whose side are you on? The guests or the gatekeeper? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from behind the scenes of Hollywood.